You trusted someone completely. Then slowly, without warning, you started doubting your own memory, your own feelings, your own sanity. This isn't weakness. This is neuroscience. Narcissists don't just manipulate emotions. They physically rewire the brain's threat detection and reward systems, creating invisible chains most victims never see forming. A narcissist isn't simply someone who loves selfies or craves attention. Clinical narcissism involves a profound inability to empathize, a need for constant admiration, and a pattern of exploiting others. The danger lies not in vanity, but in a calculated ability to identify and exploit emotional vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Most people believe abuse looks like shouting or violence. Narcissistic abuse is quieter. It arrives disguised as love, concern, or charm. The abuser alternates between warmth and cruelty so unpredictably that the brain's dopamine system becomes hijacked, creating a chemical addiction to the very person causing the harm. Intermittent reinforcement is the engine of this rewiring. When affection arrives randomly, never on schedule, the brain's reward circuitry fires more intensely than it would with consistent kindness. Slot machines use the same principle. The unpredictability itself becomes the hook, flooding the brain with dopamine each time warmth unexpectedly returns. Gaslighting doesn't just confuse you, it physically weakens the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. When someone repeatedly denies what you experienced, your brain starts discarding its own records to reduce internal conflict. Over weeks and months, you lose trust in your own perception, making you dependent on the abuser's version of reality. Trauma bonding occurs when the brain links survival with the abuser. During deactivation, the silent treatment or cruelty cortisol floods the system. When the narcissist returns with affection, oxytocin and dopamine surge. This cycle mirrors addiction so closely that brain scans of trauma-bonded individuals look nearly identical to those of drug addicts. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes permanently hypersensitive after prolonged narcissistic abuse. It starts detecting threats everywhere, even in safe environments. This is why survivors often feel anxious long after leaving. The brain learned that danger hides behind kindness, and it refuses to unlearn that lesson easily. I'm Sergiu Popovicai, psychologist in Munich, Germany. Do not forget to subscribe my channel. Most people misunderstand this process as a relationship problem. It is not. It is a neurological event. The prefrontal cortex responsible for rational decision-making becomes suppressed under chronic stress. This means the very part of your brain needed to recognize and escape the abuse is the part being systematically shut down. Understanding these mechanisms is not about blame. It is about recognition. When you see the neuroscience behind your experience, shame begins to dissolve. What felt like personal failure was actually a predictable biological response to a specific type of psychological manipulation. Knowledge becomes the first step toward genuine recovery. Sarah used to trust her instincts completely. After 2 years with a narcissist partner, she second-guessed every decision she made. Neuroscientists call this gaslighting-induced neural erosion. Repeated invalidation weakens the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for confident decision-making and self-trust. Consider the cycle of idealization and devaluation. During love bombing, the brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin, creating powerful reward pathways. When devaluation hits, the sudden withdrawal triggers the same neurological pattern as substance withdrawal, leaving the victim craving the earlier high. Hypervigilance becomes the new normal. Victims develop an exaggerated threat detection response in the amygdala. A delayed text message or a neutral facial expression triggers a cortisol surge. The brain rewires itself to constantly scan for danger, even in completely safe environments. Dr. Ramanija Rasula's research shows that narcissistic abuse survivors often develop symptoms mirroring PTSD. Flashbacks, emotional numbness, and startle responses emerge without a single physical blow. The brain cannot distinguish psychological trauma from physical danger at the neurological level. Trauma bonding is perhaps the most insidious mechanism. Intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable kindness after cruelty, creates the strongest type of behavioral conditioning known to psychology. The victim's brain literally becomes addicted to the abuser, releasing bonding chemicals precisely when hope flickers back. Marcus, a 34-year-old teacher, could not stop defending his narcissistic partner to friends. This is cognitive dissonance at work. The brain, unable to reconcile the charming person from week 1 with the cruel person from today, constructs elaborate justifications to reduce the psychological discomfort. Mirror neurons play a crucial role. Victims unconsciously absorb the narcissist's projected emotions, shame, anger, confusion. Neuroscience confirms that we neurologically mirror those around us. A narcissist's emotional chaos literally becomes the victim's internal state, felt as if it originated from within. The hippocampus, responsible for memory consolidation, shrinks under chronic stress. Survivors frequently report gaps in memory, confusion about timelines, and difficulty recalling specific incidents. This is not forgetfulness. It is a measurable neurological consequence of sustained psychological abuse. Understanding these mechanisms is the first step toward healing. When survivors learn that their confusion, anxiety, and attachment were neurologically manufactured responses, self-blame begins to dissolve. The brain that was rewired through abuse can be rewired again through safety, therapy, and informed recovery. Picture a partner who alternates between explosive rage and sudden affection. Your brain's amygdala grows hyperactive, constantly scanning for danger. Over months, your prefrontal cortex weakens as emotional regulation circuits deteriorate from chronic stress hormones flooding your system daily. When a narcissist gaslights you about events you clearly remember, your hippocampus begins doubting stored memories. Neuroplasticity works against you, creating false uncertainty pathways. Eventually, you stop trusting your own recollections, relying instead on their fabricated version of reality. Walking on eggshells around a narcissistic parent trains your anterior cingulate cortex to prioritize their moods over your needs. Brain scans show reduced activity in self-referential regions. You literally lose neural capacity for independent thought and authentic emotional expression. Intermittent reinforcement creates dopamine addiction cycles similar to gambling. Your ventral tegmental area lights up unpredictably, keeping you hooked on rare moments of approval. This neurological pattern explains why victims stay despite consistent mistreatment and emotional devastation. Chronic criticism from a narcissistic boss elevates cortisol, shrinking your hippocampus volume measurably. Studies show workplace bullying victims develop smaller memory centers within 2 years. Your brain literally physically deteriorates from sustained psychological abuse in professional environments. Love bombing floods your nucleus accumbens with oxytocin and dopamine, creating artificial bonding. When withdrawal follows, your brain experiences genuine chemical withdrawal symptoms. This explains the physical pain of narcissistic discard and why reconciliation feels biologically necessary. Triangulation forces your brain into constant social comparison mode, activating the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex excessively. You waste cognitive resources analyzing rival relationships instead of your own well-being. This neural hijacking leaves you perpetually exhausted and unable to focus on recovery. Silent treatment triggers your anterior insula, the same region processing physical pain. Brain imaging confirms social rejection activates identical pathways as broken bones. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between emotional abandonment and bodily injury, explaining the visceral suffering. Understanding these mechanisms empowers recovery. Neuroplasticity works both ways. With distance from narcissistic influence, your brain rebuilds damaged circuits. Therapy, mindfulness, and healthy relationships restore prefrontal function. Your neural pathways can heal, reclaiming authentic selfhood and emotional freedom. The rewiring begins with intermittent reinforcement. Your brain's dopamine system gets hijacked by unpredictable reward cycles. You receive affection randomly, then face cold withdrawal. This mirrors slot machine psychology. Over time, your neural pathways become addicted to seeking validation from the very person causing harm. Next comes cognitive dissonance. Your prefrontal cortex struggles to reconcile two realities: the charming person you fell for and the cruel person you now face. This mental conflict creates chronic stress. Your cortisol levels spike repeatedly, damaging the hippocampus, which is essential for memory consolidation and emotional regulation. Gaslighting accelerates the damage. When someone constantly denies your reality, your brain starts doubting its own perceptions. The anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for error detection, becomes hyperactive yet confused. You lose trust in your own judgment, making you increasingly dependent on the narcissist for reality checks. A critical mistake survivors make is returning to the narcissist during withdrawal. Your brain craves the dopamine hits it became accustomed to. Each return reinforces the trauma bond deeper. The temporary relief feels like healing, but it actually strengthens the neural addiction, making future separation exponentially harder. Another error is isolating yourself completely. While distancing from the narcissist matters, total social withdrawal deprives your brain of corrective experiences. Healthy relationships provide new neural templates. Without them, your brain defaults to familiar patterns, keeping you stuck in old attachment schemas. Many survivors also rush into new relationships seeking validation. Your wounded nervous system cannot yet distinguish healthy love from familiar chaos. You unconsciously recreate similar dynamics. This mistake prolongs rewiring because your brain keeps practicing the same harmful patterns with new partners. The better alternative is structured no contact. contact. Complete separation allows your dopamine receptors to reset naturally. Within weeks, cravings diminish. Your prefrontal cortex regains executive function. You start thinking clearly again, making decisions based on logic rather than emotional addiction. Somatic therapy proves more effective than talk therapy alone for trauma recovery. Your body stores the abuse in muscle tension, breathing patterns, and nervous system responses. Techniques like EMDR and breathwork access these stored memories directly, releasing trauma that cognitive approaches cannot reach on their own. Finally, rebuild slowly with intentional social exposure. Start with low-stakes interactions. Practice setting boundaries in safe environments. Each positive experience creates new neural pathways. Over months, your brain learns that safety exists outside the narcissist. True rewiring happens through consistent, gentle repetition of healthy experiences. After months or years of narcissistic abuse, your brain physically changes. The amygdala becomes hyperactive, constantly scanning for threats. The prefrontal cortex weakens, making rational decisions harder. These aren't character flaws. They're survival adaptations that kept you safe in an unpredictable environment. Chronic stress from narcissistic relationships elevates cortisol levels, which damages the hippocampus over time. This explains why survivors often struggle with memory, concentration, and emotional regulation. Understanding this biology removes shame. Your symptoms are normal responses to abnormal circumstances. Recovery isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong and clear. Other days, a familiar phrase or tone will trigger old patterns. This backsliding doesn't mean you failed. It means your nervous system is still learning that the danger has passed. Realistic expectations matter. Full neurological recovery typically takes 1 to 3 years of consistent safety and support. Rushing this process creates frustration. Your brain needs time to rebuild neural pathways that were suppressed or redirected during the abusive relationship. Consistency in small daily practices matters more than occasional intensive efforts. 10 minutes of grounding exercises, brief journaling, or mindful breathing creates cumulative change. These micro-practices retrain your nervous system more effectively than sporadic deep dives into therapy work. Build environmental cues that support your new patterns. Place reminders where you'll see them. Set phone alarms for check-ins. Create physical spaces that feel safe. Your surroundings can either reinforce old survival modes or support your emerging authentic self. Accountability without judgment accelerates progress. Share your intentions with trusted friends or a therapist. External witnesses help you notice when you're slipping into old patterns. They also celebrate victories you might dismiss as insignificant. Track your progress through specific markers rather than vague feelings. Note when you set a boundary without apologizing. Recognize when you question a manipulative statement. These concrete victories prove your brain is rewiring, even when emotions feel unchanged. The final section will address how to maintain these gains when facing inevitable challenges. Life will test your new patterns. Understanding how to navigate setbacks without abandoning your progress ensures lasting transformation rather than temporary relief. Narcissists exploit your brain's neuroplasticity against you. Every cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard literally reshapes neural pathways. Your brain adapts to chaos, mistaking intermittent reinforcement for love. Recognizing this is your first act of reclaiming control. The most dangerous rewiring happens silently. You stop trusting your own perceptions because gaslighting weakens your anterior insula, the brain region responsible for gut feelings. Your instinct to doubt yourself was manufactured, not natural. Chronic stress from narcissistic abuse elevates cortisol, which physically shrinks the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Memory fog, indecision, and emotional numbness are not weakness. They are measurable neurological consequences of prolonged psychological warfare. Your strongest takeaway: the damage is real, but reversible. Neuroplasticity works both ways. Consistent safety, therapy, and boundary setting rebuild what was eroded. Healing is not metaphorical. It is biological restoration happening inside your skull every single day. Start with one action today. Write down 3 moments you dismissed your own instincts around them. Name what you felt then. This simple exercise reactivates the neural pathways gaslighting suppressed. Your gut feelings deserve to be heard again. Second action: establish one non-negotiable boundary this week. Say no to something small. Each boundary strengthens your prefrontal cortex's decision-making capacity. You are literally rebuilding the cognitive infrastructure narcissistic abuse systematically dismantled. Third action: seek one source of consistent safety. A therapist, a support group, A trusted friend. Your nervous system cannot heal inside chaos. Predictable kindness rewires threat detection circuits faster than isolation ever could. Connection is medicine. You are not broken. You adapted to survive an environment designed to confuse you. The confusion was never yours. It was installed. And what was installed can be uninstalled with patience, safety, and deliberate practice. Your brain wants to heal. It has been waiting for permission. Give yourself that permission now. The narcissist rewired you without your consent, but you hold the tools to rewire yourself back. That power was always yours. Walk forward knowing it.